So now we're going to talk about color correction. Now, all the way back in lecture 3, we talked about color theory, being able to take your computer, set it up so that way you will be able to process, your computer will be able to process and show you the colors in the correct way. Now we're going to talk about what you do to images. So I'm going to start off with this color graph here. Going to open up Photoshop and get this to open. So in the color theory class, we talked about this embedded profile mismatch window that would pop up. If you open a file that doesn't have a color profile on it, or it has a different one from what you have set up, like what we did in the color theory class, it's going to bring up this question. Hey, excuse me. All of a sudden now I have to start coughing. Um, do you want to use the color profile that's built in to this particular picture that I'm opening up, or do I want to use my color profile that I got set up on my computer? Normally, I would be using my color profile. Wow. Sorry about this. If this gets worse, I'll pause and come back so you don't have to hear me coughing all day. Um, Usually you would convert to your color profile because you're the one doing the editing of the photo. So you want to make sure the colors are represented based on your machine and your output. So that way you can get things like balancing the color and that sort of thing out correctly. If you are the supervisor, the manager, you're not the person that's going to do the editing of that photo, then you would not you would use the embedded profile because you're probably getting these files from somebody and you're not the one doing the editing of it, so you just want to look at them. So in that case, use the embedded profile so you see the color balance the way that that person created in that file. But if you're the one that's actually doing the conversion and you're the one that's actually doing the correction, the color correction, the photo retouching, the manipulation or whatever of the image, convert to your profile. At no point in time should you discard the embedded profile. That's just why. I mean, that now there's no color representation at all, and it's going to look terrible. It will. So convert to your documents profile, you hit OK, and boom, you're going to open up your file when it decides it wants to open. Come on, hamsters. There we go. All right. So in this file here, a couple things to just look at and be mindful of while you're working to do color correction. Number one, up here where the name of the file is, it will show you in parentheses what the color mode is of this file in case you don't know. So it's an RGB, which means everything is here is represented by red, green, and blue color information within the pixels that make up this picture, which is a good thing because this is how I want to see it. Now, back to that color profile that we set up in the color theory class, real quick. I want to show you under edit, you can go down to where it says, is it under edit? Yeah, it is. Good Lord, I can't see. Convert to profile is the one you want to look at. Under convert to profile, under edit here, you have the ability to change the color profile around to something else. So for instance, instead of RGB, if this needed to be in CMYK, I would be doing this convert to profile process to convert this from my current color profile to any of the other color profiles. So you will see all of your RGB color profiles. There'll be the CMYK profiles. There'll be the dot gain percentages for going to grayscale or black and white. And then any other profiles you may have in that RGB or CMYK spectrum will be listed there as well. So you'll have all of them here as an experiment to kind of test out your own monitor to see how well it represents color. Use this particular interface to change the color profile around. As you change the color profile, as long as you got preview right here checked on, and you move this interface, this little window out the way, you could choose these different profiles, especially for this file here, and you'll be able to see how the colors will shift around. With this is the entire color spectrum in this file here. So I'm seeing at certain areas, the colors will change. Of course, when I go black and white, it goes completely grayscale. But if I'm just going through these different, RGB and CMYK color profiles, and I'm just arbitrarily picking stuff, but you can see how the colors are changing based on what's going on. And that is important to kind of learn for yourself with your particular monitor that you have and the system that you're running, how everything kind of looks. If nothing else, just for education purposes. So you have your standard profile that you're always using. That's the working profile that we set up already. So that's already there. But you also have these other profiles that you can switch to if you need to. If you need to change the profile, like I need to go from RGB to CMYK, this is what I would do to go through here because I can switch to my working CMYK profile that I'd set up prior to, or I could pick one of the others to switch over to, see how the colors are going to shift, desirable, not desirable, or what have you. And then I can hit OK. And it does that. See, now it's converted to CMYK, up there in the name there in the parentheses. So that's the way to do that conversion quickly, easily, with, no muss or fuss. Um, Old way of doing that same conversion. You used to go to your edit menu and go to mode. I mean, your image menu, go to mode, and you would switch over to these different color profiles. You got your RGB, your CMYK, your grayscale. Then they got other ones with index color and lab color, multi-channel. Uh, Most of these are deprecated, meaning that you really don't use them that much anymore. There's only special circumstances where you'll ever use indexed color or you'll use the lab color mode or multi-channel mode. And they're so rare that it's almost not even worth it to talk about doing it, about how to go through the process. But let's say I wanted to switch from this RGB to CMYK. It's going to give me a message that's going to tell me, hey, it's better to go to, do I need to flatten this? So if I don't want to flatten it, I can say yes, don't flatten it. That flattening is basically taking all these layers, turning them into one. That's a no-no. You should not do that. So if you can get away with not doing it, don't do it because you won't be able to go back and undo that. Then it's going to tell me here about the converter over to CMYK, and it's better to go to edit to convert the profile that I just showed you to do the process. So even with the old standard way of doing that image and mode and CMYK color or RGB, it would tell you to do convert the profile. So better way, better process, better ingredients, Papa John's. Anyway, another reason why I opened up this file has to deal with these colors. I want to show you something that involves you seeing how in that conversion, if you notice when I did that convert to profile, how the colors were shifting in certain parts of this circle. If you want to kind of see that happen beforehand and correct for that ahead of time, I want to show you something that you can turn on. It's a neat little thing. I think it's neat, but it's something that involves you doing what is called a gamut warning. So under your view menu, there's this thing called gamut warning. What this is going to do, before I actually turn this on, it's going to put gray patches all over the areas of color that are oversaturated. So saturation is the amount of color, how much of that color is being used. RGB, CMYK. In the RGB world, you got 16.7 million colors. CMYK, you only have 65,000. So all the color combinations that exist, CMYK is limited. So because of that limit, you never want to create a design, create some artwork that's supposed to be for CMYK, like this album cover, for instance, in the lab, and you're working in the RGB world and you're using colors that are way outside of the range of CMYK. So you always want to be able to adjust what you got in RGB to what you can get in CMYK. That's always a good idea, especially if you're dealing with something that's in print. How do you do that? Well, one way is using this gamut warning, because what you can do when I click on gamut warning, See this big old gray patches all over the place. This is telling me that these colors are oversaturated. So this range of color based on my color profile in RGB and based on the color profile I have in CMYK, all of these colors that are gray, have this gray patch on it, are oversaturated. It's too much of that color. It's not within the range of the printable CMYK color. So how do you fix that? Well, the way you fix that is you turn the saturation down. And unfortunately, it's you either turn the saturation down on everything in the entire picture, or you could try to be selective with this particular range of color that's selected there or that's patched over and only affect that. A little more difficult to do that second choice. First choice is a lot easier. You're just reducing the saturation overall. Now, to reduce the saturation overall of the entire file, I'm going to show you the way to do this. This is not the best way to do this process, by the way. This is just the fastest way to do it. And I'll talk about why it's not the best after I show you what's going on. So I go to image. I go to, why is adjustments not available? Hold on. Image. Oh, okay. I didn't have a layer selected for some reason. You know, it doesn't matter which layer you got selected. It's just I didn't have a layer selected at the time. So image adjustments is lit up now, and then I'm going to go down to hue saturation. Now, why is this terrible process to use or not the best way to use this? This hue saturation and everything else under image and adjustments, these are filters. Like I mentioned before, when you go to your filter menu to apply a filter, if you apply it directly to the layer, it becomes a permanent thing, right? So it's permanently applied to that entire layer. And there's nothing you can do if you save the file, close it. When you open it back up, that application is on there and you can't get rid of it. So going to image and adjustments, these are color adjustment filters. So under the filter menu or image adjustment filters, these are color adjustment filters. And they have the same properties. When you apply them to a layer or to an image, it's going to apply to that layer. And once you save that file and close it, you're done. You can't undo that. So it's clunky and it's not the most recommended way to do it. I want to show you a couple of other options that you have when it comes to applying these color adjustment filters. Some of them we looked at already, and then we got some new things. All right, so I want to go back to hue saturation here and show you what the process would be. Is just essentially you got hue, which is the type of color, saturation, which is the amount of color, and lightness is like your brightness setting, your lighter, darker version of the color. So if I increase the saturation, you'll see how that gray patch starts covering everything. If I decrease the saturation, it goes the opposite. So I get less and less. But notice what happens. Everything starts to gray out. All right, no more vibrant colors going on. Now, the thing about this gamut warning, you can't get rid of all of it, but you can work on between this lightness value and the saturation value that you put in here. You could try to adjust to get some colors to show out, not all of them. So some of the patchiness won't go away without you just completely making everything gray. So you're really not trying to make all the patchiness go away. If you do, you could probably find a point where all the patchiness has gone away except for maybe a couple of specks. That's going to be your colors in CMYK in this case. That's the range of color I'm going to get. Kind of dull, not that bright, not that vibrant, but that's what's going to happen. And that's what's going to be applied. So if you want to do that, you can. That's just one way to be able to see what's going on. I'm going to cancel to get out of that. I'm going to go back to view here and turn off this gamut warning. That's just a way to be able to see that these real bright, nice colors that you have on your monitor, printing them out, they're not going to look the same. They're going to be a lot duller. They're going to be a lot darker because of the paper, because of the printing process, and because that ink is using CMYK color, not RGB. So hopefully that's sunk in by now. All right, now we're going to talk about another thing that you could use for your color correction. So that first part with the gamut warning and the color profile, you want to make sure your color profile is set the way it needs supposed to be set for. Then you want to, if you want to use that gamut warning on a picture from the start, you can see how over or undersaturated it is. Usually you see how oversaturated it is if you know that the project is going to be used for print purposes, that you're trying to create this thing for print. You can see how oversaturated things are, and you can see how much you got to reduce the saturation of the color. That'll give you kind of an idea of what you want to do with your color corrected things. Now I'm going to show you another panel that's called channels. So if I go to window and look for channels, it opens up my channels palette. I'm going to bring it over here so it's bigger and a little bit easier for you to see. Your channels palette will give you your individual color channels. Now, your individual color channels, basically for the red, for the green, for the blue, you can have that channel separated out from the others where you're just seeing where that color is affecting in that particular in that picture of yours. So you start off with the composite RGB. That's all three channels put together. That's what you normally see with your picture. But then you have your individual channels, red, green, and blue. These individual channels are just showing you where that particular color is having more influence in the picture. Now, this is a masking thought process. Um, if you remember when I talked about layer masking, in layer masking, uh, the areas that are white are being revealed, the areas that are black are being hidden. Anything in between the shades of gray is partially revealed and hidden. So in a mask, in a layer mask, if I painted on that layer mask with black, I would hide parts of that picture that I don't want to see. If I paint with white, I'm revealing the parts of the picture that I want to see. And then shades of gray in between. Same idea here with these color channels. These color channels, the area that's white or lighter, that's where more of that color is being used. And then anywhere that's black or real dark, all right, there's less of that color being used. So if I'm in my red channel here, I got more red over here towards this red to the yellow to the magenta range. There's more red of that red channel being used there because it's pretty much almost white, just like the whole background is. And then it starts to get grayer and grayer as I go towards violet, starts going towards the chartreuse here, getting in the lime, which is going towards the blues and the greens. When I get over here to blue, there's less and less. When I get to cyan and green, there's almost zero red at all being used, all right, in here. So that's kind of giving you an idea of how the is color distribution goes. Same thing with the green, same thing with the blue, how much of that one particular color is being used. So where it's darker, less of that color is being used. Where it's lighter, more of that color is being used. Um, when you're looking at a photo, an actual photo that you need to edit, a lot of times you will find the imbalance of color. You may be able to use that to kind of gauge how you need to change that balance. Because all really color correction is color imbalance. Where there's a color imbalance somewhere, and you need to try to change that balance of color. And you have different techniques than what you use to do that, depending on where the problem is in the picture, whether it's the whole picture or whether it's just one particular area. And you're just trying to make corrections accordingly. It's easy to do. It really is easy to do. It's just knowing which one of the techniques to use at the moment. That's really what it comes into. So going back to this. So you have your channels palette. You can use the channels palette to kind of gauge where you may see color issues going on and try to figure out which technique you want to use in which to attack and correct for that. So you can have your channels palette open and available if you need it. If you don't need it, it's fine. If you don't want to use it, that's fine too. It's just not, it's important, but it's not like super important where you have to use it this way to do color correction. You'll never hear me say, well, you have to do this way because that's the only way to do it. That's not really the case for most things within any of these Adobe based programs. There are always multiple ways to get the same thing done. And you're going to see that as an example from what I'm going to show you here. All right. So another thing about this particular file, just to kind of show you, base color wheel, all the different colors. They got them named out for the different ranges of color there if you want to deal with that. And then we want to talk about on the color correction side, we want to talk about opposites. So you can use this file as kind of your guide. Opposite color to red is cyan. Opposite the yellow is blue. Opposite the magenta is green. So what does that mean? If you get a picture that has a color cast problem, in other words, color cast is basically the lighting that that picture was shot under, whether it's the natural light, whether it's artificial light. A lot of times, some lights give off a particular color cast, just from the temperature of that light. So anyone that's working in the film department, in our film department there. You probably gone through the lighting. If you haven't yet, you will. Lighting is important because as you light your scene, you need to make sure the temperature of the lights are set to give off a particular color, color cast. You want to try to get as neutral as possible, but a lot of times, especially outside, it's not easy or not able to. So, color cast problems are one of the main things that you have to correct through Photoshop here with your color correction. So, a lot of times, if it's like sunrise or sunset time, things will tend to be overly reddish, crimson, magenta-ish kind of color, maybe in the orange range. So the opposite to that would be your cyans and anything cyans, blues, greens, going into those ranges. To opposite and rebalance the color, you know. Under fluorescent lights, usually it's going to be kind of greenish. So the opposite would be magenta, to use. So you would change the balance by increasing one and decreasing the other, if you can within the picture. Again, so many ways of doing this. It's just a matter of trying to figure out what works. So this is just kind of this little color wheel here. This color graph is just kind of a guideline to show you what is possible within this program and what you could possibly do when it comes to correcting for color and such.